Alright, what is up, gamers? What is good? It is the end of May, a fact that astonishes me. I feel like I've been saying this a lot lately, but this month really just flew by. I'm actually starting a new job tomorrow, so the month of May, I had a lot of exciting developments on that front. You know, the entire interview process and job finding process and signing the agreement and all that stuff all happened within the last month alongside many other events. Busy, 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 busy. But of course, I have always been making time for my beloved weekly Shonen Jump, and I am so excited to share what has transpired in these last four issues with you all. The only really major event is we had one series end, and as always, we're going to start with that series, talking, of course, about Alien Headbutt. Not so long for this world, a very paltry 16 chapter run. That's about as short as anything goes in Jump these days. Unlike a lot of other extremely quickly truncated series, too, it doesn't even appear to be setting up for a Tankobon bonus chapter, so I wouldn't really anticipate that happening. Instead, we've got a pretty conclusive ending. It's a real kind of our adventures continue, but on a different sort of scale ending. Where it turns out, yes, indeed, we did in fact follow just the invasion of one small island the entire time. But this opened the floodgates for all sorts of aliens to invade all over the Earth, making our hero into a kind of globe-trotting wrestler, alien buster fanatic, not too unlike the professional wrestler career of touring around to different venues and wrestling different opponents and stuff. Kind of a harkening back to the territory days, perhaps. But I really like this series, you know? I was disappointed to see it end so quickly. I thought the art style and brutality and style of combat was very, very unique for Jump. I was actually disappointed, though, that it didn't lean even further into, like, the pro wrestling theme and stick a little more closely to doing kind of pro wrestling parodies or reinterpreting pro wrestling tropes or things like that. Instead, I feel like it got a little out of focus, maybe trying to attract a wider readership, and in doing so, made itself a little less unique throughout the run. I could kind of tell the end was coming with the way that various plot points were getting really accelerated, and these last four chapters were no different. I do like that they introduced this element of like the parasites that were vaguely analogous to steroids, and they had all of this talk about the unexpected side effects of using them, and it's dangerous to take so many or whatever. But then they just kind of decided that our MC is just immune to all of this and super, super strong. So whatever, he roids the hell up and just beats everybody before they can make good on their hostage killing plan, which I think is just kind of funny. He gains rope powers that he is able to launch himself off of his own ropes, which again kind of harkens back to this pro wrestling theme, but kind of goes underutilized because the whole thing just wraps up so quickly after that. A whole bunch of very fun, very intriguing designs just kind of get spammed at us, as, you know, these are some other aliens we thought up that we're not going to have time to actually wrestle. And then we just plunge right into the final boss battle. At this point, it was chapter 15, and I thought that this might be, you know, a 21er or something like that, as many series are. So I was like, sweet, okay, at least we're going to have 5 or 6 chapters for the side characters to fight the side battles and our main character to fight the main battle, and then we'll wrap it up after having kind of fully expressed the battle potential of this series. You know, like one biggest battle right at the end. But then no, it ends in the very next chapter, which is very disappointing. Again, I thought it would at least get 20. But the final battle was pretty sweet. There's some good moments in there. I just feel like it was a step down from just previous battles within this series that ended up getting, you know, a bit more time, a bit more back and forth, a bit more of that wrestling feel. Oh well. I don't know. At the end of the day, this is how Jump is. We can bemoan the series that we lose. We can complain about series that we hate that go on forever. But this is the formula that has worked for 50 years. Sometimes you find yourself in the minority opinion, but it's the majority opinion that produces hit after hit after hit after hit. This one was not such a hit, and that's okay. That's just part of the system, too. Yeah, I don't know. It is what it is. I think the premise of having a pro wrestler guy fight aliens, which is essentially Kaniku Man, does have a lot of validity. I like exploring kind of this link between wrestling and Battle Shonen that has gone back to the very, very origins of Battle Shonen as kind of like an adaptation of wrestling tropes into manga. I think there is still a lot of fertile ground to explore that connection more explicitly. This isn't the one, but it's not going to be the last wrestling manga we see either. Yeah, that's alright. We'll give it an A for this finale month, and look forward to the next work of this author. Okay, next we're going to talk about Akane-banashi. I did these in a random order, but I am very happy to be talking about it early on when my energy is at its maximum, because holy crap, it has been so good. Akane's performance of the God of Death is one of the most impressive performances we've seen in the entire series so far, and is definitely like a turning point where before there was kind of a distinction between the performances of Akane and her peers, her rivals, where, you know, obviously there's very impressive moments, very spectacular moments, but we are invited to see it as kind of like a learning experience. We are invited to remember the challenges that they are undertaking by doing it in this way. You know, don't make them laugh, just use Jugamo, whatever. This is all actually covered explicitly in these chapters. They discuss this, that this is Akane at her most powerful, fully unleashed, giving a performance that now is kind of on the other side of that, where it's less about seeing kind of her journey and her evolution reflected in the performance, but presenting it instead as a performance of the pros, the performances of the Shinuichi, of the Okanban, whatever, where it is so amazing that it causes these kind of legendary effects within the audience. Here, paralleling a moment with the original Shiguma, where when presenting the strange story Shiguma's art, which we still know scarce few details about, the audience was so enraptured that even though a fire alarm was going off, they did not move from their seats when the building staff rushed in. They were still transfixed by the story. Similarly here, the cruise ship they're on makes an announcement about rocky weather, that they're going to be sailing through a storm and to please take precautions and blah, 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 blah. And no one notices. Really, really beautiful stuff. We talk about Akane's understanding of death, her personification of death, and here her focal point. Again, it's like, I wondered what kind of transcendental thing she would present, but I kind of like that in the end it's not like hers is categorically different than the other God of Death performances we've seen, but just rather she was able to tap into like her own personal experiences, reflecting on her master Shiguma and his unfortunate crisis, his health scare, the capriciousness of the God of Death that it takes without rhyme or reason. Really, like, really, really amazing, evocative presentation of all this stuff. And then just this feeling of, like, presenting this very multifaceted God of Death, where the audience kind of struggles to put together one coherent narrative of, is it cute? Is it creepy? Is it scary? Is it endearing? but that ultimately none of those explanations are sufficient, and rather the very idea of an explanation is is contrary to the nature of death, which is truly without explanation. Really, really, really good stuff. I just cannot get over, like, the spreads, the depictions of this stuff, the paneling, the depictions of the audience. It's so fucking good, dude. It's so fucking Kino. I don't know if I've ever seen the depiction of just the aesthetic rapture going through the audience, where they transition from being a little disinterested in this whole thing, this is just a warm-up act, to being impressed with Akane's story and recognizing that she is truly masterful at her craft, to then just being so enraptured by the story itself that they're not even conscious of the performer anymore, just hypnotized and drawn into the world of the story. Akane dubs her ability in this moment Rakugo Overdrive. This is kind of like her latest form. I really like this as an element of the plot, that she loves manga and loves video games and stuff like that, and thereby names her own power-ups and modes and states as if she's going like Super Saiyan or whatever. I think that just provides a good like anchoring to the story. It allows people to kind of understand this very nebulous thing of artistic performance and what is good and what is bad. It puts it in very concrete, like, power scaling terms, which, you know, is kind of an element of shonen that you cannot escape. It's really, like, her greatest triumph yet, I think, in terms of performance. Everyone is just in awe. So now, is she gonna get humbled? Because we still have Kaisei's performance. He's going up next. They talk about the origin of his name, the forerunner of all flowers. He's in the pole position of his generation, even though he hasn't made Shinoichi, even though he lost to Makeiru in that race. He surely cannot be humbled by someone of the next generation, by Akane. So how the fuck will he be able to manifest this story in order to humble Akane? I don't know. I don't know if it will be just like a cut and dry humbling, where the audience might be split afterwards as to who was better. Right now, he is going in at a huge, huge, huge disadvantage, because the audience is kind of tired of the story now. They don't really need any more of this story. So we know at the very least he's going to be able to blow past those resignations, that detachment, drag people back into the world of the story, make them experience something profound and significant yet again. How the fuck he's gonna do that, I have no idea. It might not be like a decisive win for him, but just something to show that Akane, even at her best, is not enough to truly soundly defeat him or anything like that. I'm sure it's gonna be really good. And then, after all this, we still have Isho's performance lurking. I don't know if we're going to see it or not. I don't know. It might be a good opportunity to finally see him perform outside of, you know, in the flashback as a child. That, I think, will be the great humbling moment for both of them, to recognize, you know, we're having this duel, you know, this is a very personally significant moment. For Akane, it represents the mastery of one of these specialties that she needs to acquire before she can really learn Shigama's art, which is, of course, still the overarching narrative of the whole series. But that they need to be reminded they are still worlds apart from the GOAT Isho. But yeah, amazing stuff. This is an easy S+ for the month. God, I just love this series so much. Next, we will talk about Drawn to the Fire, one of our brand new series. One that I'm really, really enjoying. I hope that it has the legs for a decent run, but sports series have not been faring all that well lately. All of them have been getting completely butchered at the 20 chapter mark or sooner. So I think, given that, they're also making very good economic usage of their time, immediately launching into this scrimmage game, and really diving into the meat of what the series could be long term were it given the chance to survive. You know, the tactics of basketball, the athleticism of it, the psychological mind games of it, the countering plays back and forth. They're plunging us into the deep end of all of this stuff already, which I really really like. I think that's kind of the only thing you can do is give people a taste of that right away and be like, okay, if you like this, if you think we're doing a good job with this stuff, this is our plan. We can run this for like 100 chapters if you want. Yeah, really good. I like the gimmick of this match against the scrimmage, the super ace team that's agreed to scrimmage with them, where they're like, we're not going to play our starters unless we need to. We don't want to risk their injury. They're going to be sitting on the bench. You're going to play against the B team, which is like real shit that happens in pro athletics all the time. I'm sure it happens even more, if anything, on the high school level where they're even more injury prone, I would guess. And then it just creates a good opportunity for this kind of like dynamic power scaling where our MCs ultimately win. They ultimately do draw out all of the starters. But, you know, had the starters been playing against them the whole time, maybe things would have gone differently. I just really like every chapter has like a good little interaction that has some kind of ambiguity, some sort of read, some sort of revelation happening to it. I like that the focalization switches at some point from the MCs to the rival school teams, where they are presented as like protagonists of their own story, where the MCs seem like villains. I really, really like that. I like that there's a discussion of the physicality of basketball, that our main character is pretty short. And often I think in series like this, that kind of physical limitation is just sort of like flavor, you know? They're just like, oh, well, he's short, so you wouldn't expect he would be good at basketball. End of story. But he is, you know, end of story. Whereas here, they really get into mechanically, okay, like, why is that a big deal? What does being a big guy get you? What are you unable to do if you're way smaller than the other guy? Like, why is this kind of obvious fact about the sport? How does it actually, like, break down mechanically and stuff? I really like, too, just this whole thing that the MC shoots a 3, and then is like, I only have, like, a 20% chance to do that. I'm not actually that good at doing it. I just figured in that moment, if I'm able to get one, the psychological damage is huge. Now they have to cover my 3. Really, really, really good stuff, man. Some awesome just kind of like hype moments to the depiction of all this stuff. I don't know. And then at the very end of this month, the great line too, where the MC makes a very, very ambitious, let's say, pass to his teammate, where it was like very dicey whether his teammate would actually get to the ball first. And his teammate, who's like the super tall superstar, goes like, man, what the hell was that? What if I hadn't made it? We could have thrown the whole game there. And our MC goes, well, that wasn't really anything you couldn't handle, right? And there's a little edge to him that I really like that's exposed there. He's not just kind of like a goody two-shoes, down on his luck, unexpected prodigy, but he does have like a bit of an ego. And I think, you know, that could be explored in a really, really interesting way. Great stuff. Really great stuff. I don't know. And this is reminding me why I like basketball. I get so mad watching the NBA. All the fucking flopping. Oh my god. But at the core of it is such a cool sport. Just the dynamicism of it and the tactics on display and just this continual trade-off you have to make between like confidence and vulnerability. You know, where the more dynamic a play is, the quicker it moves, the more ambitious it is, the more easy it is to poke holes into if you manage to get a read on it, or if you manage to just overpower an element of it. It's kind of like Melee in that there's a great mix of just kind of like the tactics of a good idea is like Like, if you have a good idea, it's a good idea, but it could still lose to just grit, to just a bad idea executed grittily. I love that sort of dynamic. I think that's great for like sports manga. That's a major part of like Eye Shield as well. So I'm getting glimpses of that here as well. Like, even when they have the read, we can surpass that by pushing through or whatever. I don't know. Really, 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 really good stuff. I hope this series has a chance, but man, we just keep getting these sports manga, and they show a lot of potential. I'm like, please, please, and then they just get axed. So we'll see, we'll see. Give it an A+ for the month. Next, let's talk about Roku's House of Oddities. Very crazy gag manga. We're kind of getting into the groove of this series now, spending more time with each individual character, which I like. We have a focus on Kabaneji, who's this guy wearing the yin-yang mask. He's a war curse, the grudge of a former soldier, which is kind of interesting. They do a very strange action sequence with him that doesn't really make much sense at all, but it's fun. There's some intrigue, I think, with kind of the world building of these different types of curses and how they emerge and what properties they have and what powers and stuff. I feel like by including war as a topic at all, they are treading on dangerous ground, like, ideologically. But so far, it's been very, very generic. He is just some sort of soldier. Then we had a chapter I really, really like, where we go back and meet the Science Club. If you recall, the very first chapter was that him and his Science Club were meant to be debunking all of these curses. So we get to expand the cast a little bit more with the other Science Club members. Those are some funny guys there. This is a nice just sort of break in the pattern of it being all curse-focused. And then they do something I really, really enjoy in gag manga that I regard as kind of like a foundational element of modern gag manga versus kind of like classic gag manga, is that you evoke a kind of shockingly realistic sense of continuity for comedic effects where it is unexpected. So here, all of the events of the previous chapters and other stuff that you know must just be happening as a consequence, like their big dog running around, are rumors that the Science Club is investigating and reporting to him. I really, really, really like that. I really like that kind of reframing and stuff. Very, very fun. Then a chapter where they go to a family restaurant. We get into Roku's past a little bit. His parents that are missing, dead, whatever. Points towards a bit of an emotional core of the story. Kind of fun, but I think these chapters where they're just kind of like cycling through gags for all of the main characters feel a little more like routine, a little less funny. They don't really have the zone capable for true escalation. And I was just kind of left with a feeling of like, all right, well, this could be more wacky or more heartfelt. Same with the next chapter too, where two of the curses, the vampire and the masked man, the soldier guy, accompany him to family visitation day at school. They cause a stir, but then they save the day. They're doing so because they feel bad that his parents are MIA, and thus nobody is able to accompany him. And again, it's just kind of like, well, this isn't super wacky, everything in terms of like the gags and the setup and resolution. Actually pretty cut and dry. But it's also, you know, just not super, super heartfelt either. It's not really trying to evoke any super strong emotions in you either way. It's just kind of some stuff that happens. But it is good. Like, I am enjoying this. I think this author has just a good sense of comedy and of manga and of characterization and everything. A lot of qualities that I enjoyed in A Gravity Boys are present here as well. I just wish it was a little more full send, because A Gravity Boys really, really, very, very rarely did anything but try to go for laughs. And I think here they're maybe hedging their bets a little too much. Just make it zanier. Just make it goofier. Let's see. Okay. Give it an A for the month. Alright, next let's talk about the ultimate exorcist, Kiyoshi, which is at the climax of its kind of second major arc, the journey into the demon realm to try to help Beelzebub defeat his errant bratty children. Most of this month was just the big fight between Bobo and Kiyoshi. They show a lot of pretty cool, like, high-level combat. In suggesting, future arcs. This is kind of where we're going to have our characters fighting and then escalating from further. Very good, very good. Here, there's a moment where Kiyoshi is defeated, but then all of the lesser demons evoke kind of the same technology that the villain is using, where he can summon up demonic energy from those he's loaned it out to. But here they're just giving up of their own free will their demonic energy to revive Kiyoshi and allow him to fight again. Sure. It's all pretty cliche, pretty standard. I think once the series becomes a little larger in scope and a little more elaborate, it's moments like that they really kind of understand the timing and significance of, where they can have something even more exciting happen for kind of like the run-in save or whatever. But pretty cool, and I like that when Kiyoshi is revived, he is revived with demonic powers. He has, like, black versions of all of his moves and stuff. Very, very cool. They explore the parallels between him and Bobo, both losing their moms at a young age. Very cool, very cool. And then, of course, Kiyoshi ultimately wins. Bobo recognizes the humanity in him. There's all sorts of little revelations and self-sacrifices as they realize the depths of their debts to one another, that, Bobo's mom saved Shindo. Shindo, therefore, saves Bobo. Bobo saves his father, Beelzebub, instead of trying to re-empower himself, blah, 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 blah. Again, it's all pretty by the book, and with a plot that's still, like, very, very simple. Like, this arc really didn't have too many moving pieces. I think it was executed quite nicely, although, it's not really loaded up with surprises or anything, let's say, or major twists or anything like that. It's just kind of, like, executing out all the elements that we'd seen before. They have some celebrations and partying, and that's all nice as well. And that's the end of the arc. It was a nice little arc. I enjoyed it. I liked that it was kind of lower stakes than the previous arc. The stakes were still high, but it wasn't as presented as apocalyptically. It wasn't presented as something that could have been the finale of the whole series. Rather, it sort of initiates a repeatable motion of, this is the kind of adventures our characters are going to be having going forward. I'm all for it. Bring it on. I'd love to see, many, many more arcs like this, of this scale, maybe even bigger, but not, trying to swing for the fences and being like, it's all down to this. I think the next arc, I'm hoping, will be a Kiyoshi versus Exorcists arc, where his use of demonic energy and demonic powers makes its way back to unsympathetic factions of exorcist organizations who deem him to be tainted, now too much of a threat, things like that. I think that would be a very, very interesting escalation. And then the direction you can keep going from that as well is, like, thinking about, okay, under whose orders are all of these exorcists waging war with the demons? Because it actually seems like the demons, by and large, are pretty chill. Sometimes they get evil. they do evil things. Sometimes they get power hungry. Sometimes they try to fuck with the human world. Whatever. But it seems like demon society is kind of just chilling for the most part. So the angelic organization, heaven, God, whatever, that we've already kind of been hinted at a few times, with characters having powers given to them by angels, or the Adam's Apple holy artifact that Shishido eats to power up. All of these things suggest that there is kind of like a other counter society to the Demon Society that, in the same way that the Demon Society ended up being a lot more friendly and helpful than we thought it would be, the Angel Society is going to turn out to be far more evil than we expected. And that, I think, will be great fun, too. So, a lot of directions this can go. We still have one more Ultimate Demon Lord as well. Or rather, we have one more Upper Demon Lord. I think there's like 3 tiers. And then I think eventually we will have like an Ultimate Demon Lord, which is, of course, the equivalent to Kiyoshi's Ultimate Exorcist. And then I think, you know, the angels themselves will have their own ranks and factions and everything too. Your classic kind of like 3-pillar structure of power within a battle shonen. Very, very excited to see this play out. I'm loving this series, man. It's just, the style is so good, the fights are so good, the comedy's so good, the settings and world building are so good. I just hope that it remains ambitious, remains hungry, keeps doing cool stuff. We'll give it an S- for the month. Next, we're going to talk about Shinobi Undercover. This was also the big climax of an arc for these guys. The battle against the Uzen household. Yoichi, the heir of the Uzen household, getting the spotlight. Most of this month was just battling against him. Yodoka finally getting through to him, making him understand how similar they are, and deciding instead to abandon fighting them, but instead break down the Uzen household himself. The bad guy that was scheming behind this entire operation, the head of this rebellious ninja alliance, shows up. Some more fighting there. Yoichi sacrifices himself to try to stop that guy. Sure. It's all pretty good, and there is quite a bit of emotional weight to this. I thought this was actually pretty well executed, because it both examines the macro structure of this series, the idea of these great ninja households, and are they actually good? Is it good to have these sort of expectations? Is it good to have these like rigid power dynamics? That kind of like world building intrigue I appreciate, but at the same time, just through this parallelization of Yodoka and Yoichi, it examines Yodoka's character a lot more too, and becomes kind of a moment of recognition and epiphany for him that, you know, there are other people that have lived lives similar to his in structure, other people that are these sort of combat prodigies that have like nothing else, but whereas his world has become much more rich and diverse as he's made friends, there are other people that haven't had that same sort of blessing, and that he can reach out to them, he can be some sort of bridge to them, which I thought was a very beautiful sentiment. I don't know, it's very, very nice. After that, we have, you know, our kind of intra-arc wrap-up stuff. Yodoka in the hospital. And then the ace of Squad 2 shows up. So this is somebody with perhaps unprecedented power among the characters we've seen. We know the lower your squad number, the more powerful you are. This is somebody with overwhelming powers of ice, who makes a bunch of, like, sort of confusing jokes and statements, and is implied to maybe be just as socially awkward as Yodoka, another killing savant that doesn't really understand socialization beyond that. And basically he's saying, okay, we're trying to now dissolve the Uzen family entirely. All of the great ninja clans are going to meet up and decide whether or not this is the case. Yodoka, you have to come in and testify. Which I don't know. It doesn't make really any sense to me. And like in universe, out of universe, I get it that they want to introduce these characters, and you know, the idea of Yodoka trying to like debate some point is very funny. But in universe, it's just so bizarre and so sudden and so jarring that it's a little weird. It all feels a little bit slapdash, but that's okay. I think when you have a pretty solid arc like they just had, and you don't really fumble anywhere there, you've earned some grace to kind of mess around and be a little experimental with what comes next. So we will indeed see what comes next. We'll give it an A- for the month. Really starting to enjoy this series. I think it's really coming into its own. I think that was the best arc yet. And one of the most substantial arcs yet, too. So, very excited to see where they're going to go from here. Next, let's talk about Blue Box, which was fantastic this much. We head into his match against Yuasa, which is the finals of the prefectures. Both these guys are going to nationals, which does lend a sort of unpredictability to the whole affair, because ultimately this is like not that consequential. You can say, oh, narratively it makes more sense for Taiki to lose now and then maybe get his revenge at nationals. But I think because that's kind of like the obvious answer, it is actually like a lot more ambiguous where they're actually going to go with it, which is great. Yuasa's characterization, I think, is very interesting in that he's kind of like just the most emotionally healthy character we've seen in a certain sense. He seems to have like no complexes, no mental blocks. He just loves playing badminton. He just wants to be even better. We see very little of Yuasa's internal dialogue either. Typically, during these matches, we'll have each character kind of monologue to themselves about their motivations and their perspectives and their hang-ups, and maybe come to some sort of epiphany that then coincides with some breakthrough in their play or whatever. But with Yusa, it's all people observing him. And they get into some really interesting like sports philosophy here, talking about all of the ingredients you need to win: talent, opportunity, luck, and the willingness to put in effort. So it's like, it's coping to be like, oh, well, they have XYZ and I don't. It's coping to be like, well, there's always someone better. Whereas in the end, there can be these people that just have all of the ingredients and work super hard to bring them to execution. So how can Taiki, with pure effort alone, compete? Suddenly there is a small little parable given to him by his coach between games about somebody who shoots at what he thinks is a tiger, but is ultimately just a stone. But the arrow he shoots pierces the stone. Because he thought he could pierce it, the arrow pierced it. Had he known it was a stone, not only would have the arrow just bounced off, he wouldn't have even shot. It's because he thought it was a tiger that was going to kill him, and he was shooting at it. Great little moment. Very, very good stuff. Then we get a chapter of Taiki's self-reflection. This one was especially beautiful, thinking about all the people that have blessed him in his life, all the people supporting him. Saying that the one noteworthy thing about him is that he's open to be influenced by these amazing people. I really, 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 really like that sentiment. That being kind of the locus of all self-love, which, this series talks a lot about self-love and self-compassion and recognizing, the qualities you love within yourself. And Taiki being like, I love that I am so influenced by other people I love. I thought was really, really nice. And something that I think a lot of people that struggle with self-loathing should use as kind of like an anchor point, as a first step on that journey of self-love, is saying, even if I feel like I loathe myself, I do love others around me, and I do recognize that they are rubbing off on me bit by bit. And this is something that Haruto was also kind of realizing, that Taiki was rubbing off on him, and that the qualities he admired in Taiki he is beginning to witness in himself. It's really, really good stuff. And now we see kind of like that same philosophy advanced within Taiki. And then, bombshell, we find out that Shinatsu Senpai is gonna go overseas to study for a year. Crazy, crazy. Huge development, huge revelation. Just sort of a fact dropped in the middle of this match, Taiki manages to take game 2, kind of fueled by being inspired by Chinatsu, not feeling any sort of resentment or loss, but just encouraging her to go see the world, to seize her ambitions, and to come back, and he'll be waiting. Really, really lovely. Again, the emotional maturity off the charts. But it makes me wonder, are we actually even gonna get a Nationals arc? This might all be ending sooner than I thought. Because I've started to kind of see a feeling of like, wow, this could actually be like wrapping up now. That there just isn't much more emotional ground to cover. And like, I think an ending that's just like, all right, now Taiki manages to beat Yusa for the first time. So now he knows anything is possible. Anything is possible. He heads off to Nationals. Chinatsu, soon after that, will head off to America. The field of their lives are vast and open, and they've self-actualized to an extent that you feel confident that they're going to seize everything before them. And then, like, do we really even need to see it? Would that not be an even more poetic ending? Very, very in line, I think, with the philosophy of this series. To just have them... There they go. There they go. 2 young lovers seizing the world. I don't know. We're gonna find out. I would love to see Nationals, because I love this series and I want to see even more. That's just kind of the vibe I'm getting. I don't know. We will see. But we will give it an S for now. Really, really good stuff. Next, let's talk about Ichi the Witch. Oh, what a weird arc we're in right now. It was set up to kind of be like this subterfuge, mystery, everyone is a suspect sort of arc, where we know there's like a traitor in the Witches Association. We've got these magic cops that have shown up out of nowhere, and maybe they're a little bit sus too, because they have this sort of abrasive relationship with the witches. Maybe at least some of them are kind of sus or whatever. All these kind of questions. It had this sort of like urban, almost noir feel, where all of these characters are just situated in the same city trying to feel things out. And then, no. None of that happens. It's not like that at all. No. Here's the bad guy. She did it. Don't worry about anybody else. She did it. And all the magic cops, did they seem like bad guys? Did they seem a little edgy? No, don't worry. They're good guys. They're all good guys. It's fine. Very, very bizarre structuring. But it's all good. Like, at the macro level, and I find myself saying this about this series over and over again, the macro level, I'm like, what are you doing? I feel like you're throwing away so many opportunities for intrigue, so many opportunities for tension, for revelations, for moments of surprise, for these like showstopper moments where information is revealed. You're taking all of these seeds that you like just planted, that are so clearly going to bloom, that are so deliberately set up to be like, this is a flower that when blooms will shock your readership and be discussed for years, the revelation that XYZ was the traitor. And then immediately scooping up all the seeds again and just nom, 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 nom. No, just kidding, I want them as seeds. Let's do them now. I don't know, man. It's weird. But yeah, like I said, all this stuff is pretty sick. The fight against the Bullet Witch is fantastic. They take her out pretty easy, all things considered, pretty quickly, but again, in a very exciting way. It's like really unclear why she decided to attack in the way she did when she was so obviously outgunned by the Magic Keepers, but I don't know, I guess she was just arrogant. And then Fujimine, the Annihilation Witch, who is, you know, the villain of what I thought was going to be like a saga of multiple arcs, but now is just here now, shows up, right away, again, right away, no time for surprise, no time to think otherwise, no time again to kind of speculate on if maybe more than one witch was in on it among the Witches Association or anything like that. No, 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 no time at all. No time to kind of feel like, okay, well, we took down this pawn, but the ringleader is lurking in the shadows. No, here she is. Right away. I do like her power, though. It's very intriguing. It's very creepy, where she doses everyone with her love. They all fall in love with her. They all just instantly accept whatever she says, except for one brooding magic cop who then now has to fight against all of his brainwashed former allies, and the Annihilation Witch, and the Bullet Witch who just got freed again. It's good. It's exciting, because I'm sure that'll be a cool fight scene, and it'll show a lot of grit and resolve, and who knows what all will happen. But it's just like, is there nothing more we could have done with this concept? We just, again, you spent all the time drawing up these little intricate cards of traitor and shadowy operative and morally ambiguous, unclear what their alignment is characters, and then just being like, we're just gonna play them all. Here they are, all back to back to back to back. I don't know. It's weird, but it's good. We'll give it an A for the month. Very solid. Just the action and stuff is great. Characters great. I just wish the writing was a bit more ambitious. Anyways, next let's talk about Nue's Exorcist. I wish the writing here was a lot more ambitious. Actually, let me take a break. Yeah, I'm gonna take a break. I have to go out for dinner and stuff. I will finish this off tonight, hopefully. See you then. Alright, I am back. Let's talk about Nue's Exorcist. Last month, I was actually really positive about it. I think it was the most positive I have been since I started this series of videos. I just thought, the battle was pretty cool. The choreography of it was a lot more high effort than many of the other fights. Just the escalation of the conflict was really good. They just kept the tension high, kept the pace rolling. It didn't degrade into any sort of harem, tedium, BS nonsense. All of that was great. And most of that continued into this month as well. The idea that Kasha was the one to create the Fujino family because he's got these grand schemes of domesticating humans. Gakuro's counterattack and counter-arguments about the freedom of humanity and the wonders of it and stuff. Again, it's not the most inspired thing ever. It's not, anything I've never seen before in Battle Shonen, but it was hitting those nice Battle Shonen triumphant speech, rallying a counter-attack type feelings, which is something that is far above the par for this series. Then, in another Shonen cliche, Gekka kind of sacrifices herself in order to land what they hope is a lethal blow against Kasha. Belabored flashback here, really kind of driving home the weightiness and significance of this flashback of a character that, again, was just introduced in the previous arc and has really done very little besides, the two fights she was involved in, but whatever. I'm kind of reiterating all that stuff. But they move through it fairly quickly, They don't spend more than, just a few pages on it. Then Kasha summons in the corpse of the Dragon King, which he is consuming to power up. He runs off and says, okay, I'm gonna come back in a few days when I'm powered up and we'll fight again. And then I was like, oh god, here we go. Yet another training arc. This one at least doesn't have some stupid gimmick associated with it. So far, at least, there is no, bizarre child rearing thing, or unlocking an egg in his heart or something, or really, as far as I can tell, it's at least going to be kind of like physical combat training. You know, it has some fight scenes already that were pretty good. But I don't understand. Oh, and then Nue shows up and is like, your training's not going to be enough. I have an alternate path to power, which may end up involving, you know, all of this harem, lame, rom-com fan service BS. Who knows? We will see. Hopefully not. Because I definitely do prefer these training arcs where it's like, you know, something substantial, something where the characters are like actually moving and engaging, and it feels logically like they are training for combat and practicing combat and things like that, instead of some totally unrelated silly thing that, you know, they're saying is some training method. So who knows? But I don't understand this fixation, this obsession with just training arcs in general. I'm generally not a fan of them. The way they just kill the momentum of the plot and pacing and anything for something that is like promised to you to be kind of inconsequential. Because if the training was sufficient, and if the training is, you know, enough that Gakuro will win trivially or whatever, then like what's the point of the fight scene afterwards, right? Like you're kind of like, the two goals are conflicting when it comes to storytelling. I mean, this is a complaint about training arcs in general, that you want to have like an underdog making a miraculous victory. You want to have a dynamic fight where halfway through our main protagonist has like an epiphany, or someone makes some sort of sacrifice, or they have some sort of breakthrough into an untapped reserve of power that causes a transformation or a technique unlock or something like that. You want to have some feeling of something growing and evolving throughout the course of the battle to make it exciting and compelling. So why would you then also have a whole training arc before that you know is going to ultimately be kind of like inconsequential, right? The only way training arcs have ever really made sense to me is so that the manga makes more sense in terms of like the in-universe power scaling logic to appease people that are like, well, based on Kasha's feats, Gakuro shouldn't stand a chance, and if he doesn't have some sort of training arc, then the plot will be, you know, too unbelievable or something. To which I say, it's manga, it doesn't have to make that much sense. Like, I just find that kind of attitude like incredibly frustrating. And I think, you know, the idea is that after the training arc they have some like cool new moves or whatever. That's typically the kind of goal. But again, it's like, that is a context where you try to show off the cool new moves in like a squash, where the MCs annihilate a lesser party, and you're like, damn, look at all those cool new things they were doing. I can't wait to see those new techniques and strategies and whatever get put to the test against the real foe. But here, they're going up against the real foe. They're going up against the guy that's been hyped up more than any other enemy so far. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, I know this isn't going to be enough. I know whatever the hell he's doing isn't going to be enough, because whatever actually allows him to win the fight isn't going to be revealed until halfway through the fight. So it's just very frustrating, just very self-defeating storytelling, sacrificing all this momentum they had built up, sacrificing all of this feeling of excitement and escalation, and you never know what's going to happen next, you know? Those sorts of thrills that I was starting to get from this series for the first time in a long, long time. And then they really just, like, slammed on the brakes. It's a training arc. Whatever. We'll see how it goes. I'll give it a B- for the month. Some good stuff, but the swerve away from what I thought was working is very frustrating. Next, let's talk about Underdoctor, which shifted into a mode that I had been hoping for from the start. First, there was a standalone adventure of his assistant, doing a bit more characterization of her. It's her day off, and she decides to spend it all hanging out and having fun at the mall. Really, really enjoyed that. I am, of course, a big fan of the mall. I go to various malls in Toronto very, very often and just have a good time. It's a great afternoon outing. You go to the food court, you check out some of your favorite stores, you see if there's anything new in the mall. Having a little walk indoors is very nice. Anyways, I love the mall. I think it got across some of the elements of joy within the mall. I wish it was even more about that, but of course, that's more of a one-day outing four-man terrain, I guess, rather than what's more normally a battle shonen to swerve off and talk about the mall. And then, of course, yes, there's an obligatory action plot where she stops like a terrorist. Sure, sure. Then we had 2 chapters of real-ass medical drama, which is what I was kind of hoping for from the start of the series. The first one is about his kind of protege pseudo-student, the former mute person that he rescued, and is now allowing to kind of learn to be a doctor under the underdoctor's watch and care. Really nice little down-to-earth drama where he recognizes that someone he chats with at the library is likely having a stroke, showing you, the reader, real shit about how to detect a stroke early and how to respond. Very down-to-earth things that you can do without superpowers, without medical training, whatever. I like the emphasis, too, on how he took a very detailed log of all of the symptoms, including times that he was able to hand off to the paramedics as soon as they got there. I think that is like a great kind of way to encourage involvement and care and agency when you are trying to help someone through some sort of medical crisis, that doesn't make potentially dangerous suggestions of like, and then give her the Heimlich or whatever. Just leave it to the authorities, get the authorities there ASAP, but then give them as much information as you can. That is how you can help. So really, really, really nice chapter there. That's the kind of medical excitement that I had hoped this series would foreground. And then the next chapter as well. It was a standalone medical drama adventure. Another kind of one-shot character emerges, the singer that the underdoctor likes that's always singing in the park, where he goes to exercise. It turns out she has throat cancer. The doctor, in a show of benevolence and charity, gives her the surgery. Good medical theming, good discussion of the surgery, the potential complications to one's singing voice, blah, 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 blah. Really nice stuff. But my 2 complaints are, 1, this is as close as we've gotten to the Blackjack formula, where, he rolls up on some medical crisis, has, through his supernatural ability to be a good doctor. Here it is literally supernatural in that he can, like, perceive the pain points or whatever. Whereas Blackjack was just unfathomably cheat code level good at medicine, so really it's kind of all the same in the wash. They encounter this medical problem, they use their impeccable skills and solve it, and then kind of make this hasty, pretend you never saw me type departure. I think, though, contrasting the two, which is easy to do when they go for such a similar plotline, he's a lot less interesting than Blackjack. Blackjack certainly had much more of an edge, much more of a dynamicism, much more of a feeling of just being really engrossing and really fascinating, whereas the underdoctor is so, like, milquetoast, so kind, so reasonable and stable. His quirks are just kind of like charming and superficial, just checking the boxes of having quirks. And again, I'm just sort of disappointed that they didn't try for kind of a more interesting, compelling character. One that harbors some sort of contrasts one that makes you curious at times how he will respond to something instead of just assuming he will take the maximally benevolent way. My other complaint, too, is that this is another plotline, and these happen pretty often in these kind of medical dramas in Japan, where the crisis is kind of anchored on the fact that the potential patient doesn't have the money for treatment, doesn't have the money for, like, the proper treatment, at least. Sometimes this is explained as, like, hospital fees. Sometimes it says, oh, this is a very expensive surgery or whatever. But I don't really get it, because Japan has universal healthcare. What, like, it's come up so many times that there must be something real here. But it's like, it's always presented as this, like, totally insurmountable amount of money. And, you know, I thank God I don't live in America, but I know a lot of Americans, and I know how terrible and scary their healthcare system is, where you can just go flat out broke trying to pay for some sort of treatment, or just be straight up unavailable to afford it. But in the States, there is an entire, like, shadow industry of, like, healthcare loans and GoFundMes and just kind of, like, desperate attempts to pool and corral money, such that, you know, obviously a lot of people still die from inadequate Medicare, but there's like all these, like, means tested ways to get, you know, some things comped and all that stuff too. There is, like, pathways, right? There is lots and lots of ways you can try to get the money together. They don't always work. You shouldn't have to do that in the first place, but all of this stuff does exist. So, like, why would Japan, a country that does have universal healthcare, but maybe does have, like, auxiliary costs or additional fees for, like, certain procedures or something, is it, like, a cultural thing that they just don't have the GoFundMe? But it's just always so, like, and I'm not criticizing the realism of it as much as I'm criticizing, like, the laziness of it, where it's just like a thought terminating cliche of medical issue. Okay, but isn't there, like, a medical solution? Oh, but we don't have the money. And then the crisis is, like, perpetuated. There's no more interesting thing you could have come up with that's preventing her from getting the treatment she needs. It's just sort of like, oh, well, they don't have the money. And that's it. And there's no, like, okay, but maybe she could get the money from any number of means. Is there no programs? Is there no loan agencies? Is there anything? I don't know. It's just odd. So that, again, it's kind of a little half-baked. And then I found this, like, really shameful. Like, they couldn't come up with anything better, and just indicative of how stupid and broken our intellectual property laws are, that she's singing a real song throughout the chapter, the lyrics of which I'm sure are poetically pertinent to the story of the chapter and stuff. But because Viz, I guess, doesn't want to pay for the license to use the lyrics. You got a license for them music, governor? You got a license for them lyrics, huh? For that sequence of words? Whatever, I don't know. They censor it. They censor it. They just use little musical note sound effects instead of lyrics. It's, like, actually so freaking absurd. And this keeps happening with manga. And it's just, like, reason number 8,000 why official localization is always gonna trail behind scanlation, and why translation, archival, and other kind of, like, access to media projects is so stunted and so limited because of these, like, arcane and dystopian, frankly, IP laws. That's like, wow, we can't translate the lyrics of that. Stupid. Anyways, whatever. And then I don't know if it was, like, an editorial swerve if maybe it wasn't doing as well in readership or something, and they were like, oh shit, we need to do something. But this whole episodic medical drama type thing stopped. We are launched into an arc that is full of battles and intrigue, with such an astounding speed, where we get like a new kind of mission is established, a new character is introduced who's like the Underdoctor's comrade or whatever. He's shown to have his quirks and foibles or whatever. That's all done in like 2 pages. We learn the Doctor's like entire backstory, the mysterious ailment that he's trying to cure in his friend. We learn about the shady organization that is researching the same disease because they see it as a pathway to immortality, that the Doctor wants to defeat because they pose some sort of threat to his friend, but also they have information that might help cure his friend. So we go through all of that stuff, and then we get all the way to them raiding the enemy headquarters base in Cambodia. And that's where the chapter ends. And I'm like, oh my god, did somebody tell you guys you're getting canceled? Like, are you actually just trying to squeeze in all of this plot point and this entire ending in like the next 3 chapters or something? It's so bizarre. It's not bad. I liked all that stuff, but man, there was like 4 points at which that chapter could have and should have ended. I think the pacing is just really all out of whack, but whatever. We'll see. I thought it was doing pretty well. It always seemed to be pretty high up in the table of contents. So I'm surprised if it's getting the axe, but the entire cohort that it was in with Kinato's magic and alien headbutt, I don't know. Maybe none of them are long for this world. We might have like another totally dead batch. Jeez, it's strange times for new series in Jump. I think the established series are like very, very strong right now, but that actually makes it harder for new series to make inroads on surveys and stuff like that. Anyways, we will give it an A for the month. I really did enjoy those medical drama standalone adventures. I think that's where the series is most unique and most interesting to me. But I understand if they're trying to make a play for readership. Probably being like the 4th best battle shonen is better than being the one and only medical drama shonen. So we'll see. We'll see where they go, where they end up settling on that. Next, we've got One Piece, which swerved in a bizarre direction. As always, you know, you can go watch my full videos on all this stuff, chapter by chapter. Really, really intriguing thing where, you know, the fight between Emu versus Loki continues. There's much, much more lighthearted glimpses around Elbaf, seeing what other characters are up to, deepening some other mysteries, setting up some intrigue, which tonally was very weird. The tonal juxtaposition of that felt very odd while this totally apocalyptic battle is happening elsewhere. But of course, you know, it's very likely that they're going to fight to some sort of standstill and then Emu's going to have to retreat. Sure, sure, sure. Zaza, the god of rain, appeared as Killingham Sleeptid, the thing that Killingham is most afraid of, because people that live atop the red line are actually above the clouds, and so the idea of rain freaks them out. I really, really liked that, and I love this idea that there is actually like a pantheon of primordial gods that we may see all interacting with one another in some Origin of the Worlds flashback at some point. So a lot of stuff being set up, a lot of moments right at the edge, a lot of, you know, crises, and then just kidding, it's time for the Brook true flashback. Oda, for a while now, has been giving the Straw Hats, like, true flashbacks, where, okay, you've already seen, like, one slice of their adulthood, the kind of motivating incident that led them to the moment where they meet Luffy, or one slice of their childhood, sorry. I said adulthood, I think. But here is the story behind the story. You know, Shanks got one, Zoro kind of got one, Luffy, of course, had a huge one. Some of the other Straw Hats, it doesn't seem likely that they could have one. But now Brook is having one. Brook, we need to see the story of how he became a pirate. But then, just kidding, it's a flashback in a flashback where we need to see the story of how he joined the Royal Guard that he was a part of before he became a pirate. Really, really, really bizarre stuff from Oda. This is the kind of thing that One Piece haters make fun of One Piece for, is suddenly having like a Matryoshka of flashbacks within flashbacks in moments where in the present day critical plot stuff is happening. It already happened in Elbaf once. A flashback within a flashback happening at a very, very crucial time. Now it's happening again. Just crazy. But I am really enjoying it. It's all great. I love seeing Brook as a young man, as a flesh and blood human. My conspiratorial theory is that they're doing this in part because they really, really like the actor they got to play live-action Brook in the live-action series, and they want to give him more to do besides just voice acting for a CGI skeleton. That I can neither confirm nor deny. Probably not true. I don't know. This is probably something that Oda intended. But it is all very fun, very charming. I love the setting of it. I love this kind of like mobsters versus royals world that they seem to be entrapped in. So far, unlike a lot of other flashbacks, it hasn't kind of pointed to some other significant events happening coincidentally in the era of the flashback. In fact, we haven't even had anything like teased that we know happened around 70 years ago. Like, it just doesn't read as an exciting time in the history of the world. It's before the Rocks pirates, long before the Roger and Whitebeard pirates and all of that. So, I don't know. Like, I think there's still an opportunity for all of that stuff, but it hasn't happened yet. And I really am curious, like, what significant events could this be leading up to, besides what we already know about, which is, Brook becomes a pirate, something happens to the kingdom, and Princess Shue or whatever gets hauled off to become Gunko. I don't know. Is it just going to be like those events and they're sad? Or is there going to be some surprises? I don't know. We'll see. But it's fun. Even an S+ for the month. Stuff with Zaza was awesome. Lots of intrigue there. And then the Brook flashback I'm enjoying, but it's like, this is really what we're doing? Oh my gosh. Okay. Alright. Next, let's talk about Class 2B Hero Destroyerz. I don't know. This one, it hasn't grasped me yet. There's like some really strong ingredients. I can tell that Sorachi is like a vet at this stuff. You know, his reputation long precedes him. This is one of the more anticipated returns to Jump probably ever, given what a huge hit Gintama was. But so far, it just doesn't seem like more than the sum of its parts in any way. All of the parts are like okay, but not amazing. The premise just feels a little strange and convoluted and unsure of itself. Like, within this month of chapters, the entire premise swerves drastically, and it's very unclear whether or not this was the plan the whole time. And if it was, you know, why wait this strange amount of chapters? So basically, yeah, instead of being the Demon Lord is at school, trying to fit in at school, and it's about the juxtaposition of that, instead, the entire school gets teleported to the demon world, and now it's a bunch of ordinary people are receiving demonic powers and having to adjust themselves to the demon world. So instead of a reverse isekai, it's an isekai, basically. And it's like, okay, well then why not just, like, start with that, I guess? Or, like, why not get there by the end of chapter 1 or something? I don't know. It's very, very strange. A bunch of characters were introduced this month. Student council characters. There's some good fun ones, silly ones, goofy ones, all that good stuff. The powers are pretty fun, too. The president's lazification ray, which leads to a bunch of really blatant meta jokes that kind of just come out of nowhere and seem to be a little disjoint with, like, the spirit of the series up until this point. I don't know. And then they set up this idea that now a new Demon King castle is there. They're going to start getting raided by heroes, the 7 legendary heroes or whatever. It's like, okay, and it's pretty funny. I do enjoy, like, the moment-by-moment humor. Characters are fun, all that stuff, but I'm just kind of like, what are we doing here? What is the point? Can we have something a little more substantial that doesn't just kind of feel like you're making it up as you go along, you know? So far, I haven't really had that. I haven't really found, like, a hook that makes me super intrigued as to what is going to happen next. The structure just feels very loose in a way that is just kind of unsatisfying instead of intriguing. The genre doesn't seem totally sure of what it wants to be yet, on the spectrum of, like, gag comedy to comedic battle shonen to isekai fantasy, whatever. I don't know. It's all right, but it's odd. I'll give it an... Oh, I meant to give this an A-. It's supposed to be an A-. Pretend this is an A-. I guess I forgot to change it. Or maybe I changed it in the wrong spot or something. I changed it for last month's. But this should be an A-. Canonically. If you're tracking the rankings at home, it's supposed to be an A-. Alright, now let's talk about Hima-ten, which is definitely heading to the conclusion, which I think is great. I think it had a good, solid run. Didn't overstay its welcome. Didn't get to a point of endless retreading stupidity, and thereby skated right past a lot of the problems other rom-coms and jumps have, like, completely drowned in. And these kind of final climactic arcs do feel like they've got the significance and weight that I would want from something like that, from the big climax of a romance. Really nice. He goes over to Honoka's place to study. She gives him a letter and says, hey, I don't want you to open this yet because I know you've got a lot going on, but when you get a chance, after, you know, this, and this, can you please read this letter and really, like, respond to it? So obviously this is a confession letter. Even he, with the thickest of MC skulls, realizes it's a confession letter, which is great. We all know what it says. Imori is doubting himself and second guessing, but has a good idea of what it says. But now he is still just kind of in conflict because he can't quite figure out what his feelings for Himurine are. So Himurine as well understands that Honoka likes him, that she's planning on confessing to him, that they will end up as a couple if she doesn't do anything, and is also very, very conflicted with him, with that. She feels like the time we spend together has to mean more than that. As she puts it, that she is also unsure of what relationship they currently have or what relationship she would like to have with him, but she feels like she's got to make one last effort for her own sake. I like all of that too. I like that. I don't know. Then there's a whole chapter where for the first time ever it really gets into her job as, like, model slash influencer slash CEO of a makeup company aimed at teens, showing, you know, the juggling of everything. The format of the chapter was nice. I like the kind of thoughtfulness around the character, but the lionizing of her, like, girl boss lifestyle I found a little distressing. Like, she is just a kid. She should not be living this way. But whatever, it's just manga, it's just fantasy. It's kind of fun. And I also think it's very weird that they waited so long to have this sort of chapter, which is something they acknowledge in the text, that Imori is, like, damn, man, I never saw what her life was really like. This whole time we'd been so close, and yet I have totally underestimated how much you are taking on. And I just kind of felt like, what a wasted opportunity, maybe? But the fact that in universe, Himurine is also feeling like, what a waste that I only told him this now. I only showed him this now. I don't know. It was like interesting. Then they have this whole thing where he's gonna do the final cleaning, and this is being photographed and stuff for a photo book she's putting together that just kind of like is a glimpse behind the scenes of her entire life. In this, she really tries to recontextualize their relationship as purely professional, but deep down she knows it isn't. Deep down he knows it isn't. And at the last moment, he comes back because he goes, I don't think either of us can leave it like this. So, I don't know. And then she acknowledges, like, you know, I'm doing my entire professional life is for girls like Honoka. So if I betray her and cause her to experience this heartbreak, and I go off with Iemori, how can I possibly be happy with myself? How can I possibly be happy with my work or whatever? So I don't know how they're going to maneuver this exactly, because I think Honoka's going to win. But I am very curious how they will maneuver through this of Hima and Iemori recognizing that they have feelings for one another that are beyond professional, beyond friendship even, that do have some element of romantic love. And I am interested because I have faith in this series, because this series has managed to stave off stupidity for so long. I think they'll actually do a good job, which is a great feeling, because a lot of rom-coms would not. So we'll see. I think it'll wrap up probably in the next few months, and I'm looking forward to it. Give it a B+ for the month. Alright, Ruri Dragon is back. After 2 months of no chapters, we get one chapter here. But what a chapter it is! Really hitting on the trifecta of Ruri Dragon, which is the kind of social relationships, social examining, removing all the supernatural elements and telling a story of just these types of characters. Here, a single mom with a kid apologizing to her for giving her such a weird life after Ruri finally asks, hey, why the hell did you have a kid with a dragon anyways? She says that it was just a selfish desire of hers. And then Ruri hits her with the quit apologizing for your past self line, which became the title of the chapter. Really, really nice stuff. The second element being just the beautiful depiction of the very slice of life scenes that they find themselves in. Not just, you know, that the art is good, but I think they give a lot of care and consideration to the paneling and the framing to really immerse yourself in the story. Here, you know, they're out on this hike in this super remote area that is kind of like a DMZ between humankind and dragonkind, a neutral ground on which they can meet. I love the way it's all depicted. I love the way their journey upward is depicted. Definitely one of the strengths of this series is such an immersive, full-on manga experience. And then the third element, of course, being the draconic, the supernatural. After what felt like another setup for another cliffhanger, after, you know, an easy endpoint that ends right before Ruri actually meets a dragon, we see a freaking dragon for the first time in 46 chapters over how many freaking years. We finally see a dragon. We are so back. We are so freaking back. It's dragon time. The KyoAni series will probably end right here. So many questions raised by this. The dragon just seems like a purely animal entity, and it's massive and terrifying and roars and all this stuff. So excited to see her interact with it. I don't know. Maybe it'll just take human-esque form. It'll become a humanoid or something. Be kind of, I don't know. That'd be kind of disappointing, I think, maybe. But of course, we do know certain things that a dragon surely must have been able to do with a human. So there's a lot of questions that might have a very intriguing answers. We also know that this dragon has some sort of connection to Ruri, but isn't her father. So maybe her half-sibling or something like that? I don't know. We will see. But really, really great stuff. Fantastic chapter. We're going to give it an S for the month. I would often give Ruri Dragon, like, because I grade the individual chapters too, and then my monthly grade is kind of like an aggregate. Not like a strict aggregate, but just kind of like looking at those 4 chapters, what is my vibe overall? And then the ratings for each chapter is more just to kind of like remember how positive or negative I was on it. Often, Ruri Dragon would have like one chapter at like an S- or something, but then I would give it like an A or an A+, because I was like, well, it's only one chapter. It shouldn't be compared to the other works that had like 4 chapters or whatever. Which, like, I don't know. I can see it both ways. But I decided at some point, Ruri Dragon doesn't need to get curved down or whatever. We're going to get 1 chapter a month, or 1 chapter every few months, or 2 chapters a month, or whatever it is we get. It should be judged on those standards. And so it gets a full S this time. Alright, next let's talk about... Actually, let's take a little break. I've been yapping too much. I was out for dinner and I was talking. Okay, little break. Hello, it is much later. I just finished my first day at work, or just finished. I finished a while ago my first day at work. Went really well, but all day I was just looking forward to yapping more about manga. We're gonna get back into it with Sakamoto Days. I don't really know if I have a whole lot to say about it this month. It's just been fight at the climax of all climaxes in this final saga. We focus mostly on Tenkyu. He returns from the prison arc, trying to track down Shin. I enjoyed this kind of messy situation where both the heroes and villains have no idea who this guy is, or whether or not he's on their side. He's not really actually on either of their sides, but he teams up with the good guys, believing that they will somehow lead him to Shin. It's unclear to them, of course, what Tenkyu's motivations really are, but there's some good stuff there. I always like how Tenkyu fights. He managed to finish off the new assassination siblings that have been fighting there for quite a while. Then we return to Shin's fight against Tanabata, the guitar man. This is kind of like a much anticipated enemy. He'd been hyped up for quite a while. Even within these few chapters, there's a scene where Nagumo and Shishiba talk about kind of the overall flow of this big war between the New Order and Old Order, and how Tanabata was kind of like a trump card, wild card, something that Oki had always planned on being like a secret weapon of sorts, and that it's, Shin is their own secret weapon, somebody that is capable of rising to that occasion. It's a pretty hype fight. I do like the way both these guys fight. I think it's kind of interesting that a lot of Shin's strongest powers around like mind reading and imposing ideas into someone else's mind are countered by this guy only thinking about lyrics all the time. His brain is just fried. He's a true oddball, a true pervert for just music and battle. So a lot of stuff that Shin normally has been doing in his fights isn't working anymore. But at the same time, so many of his other methods are leveling up. He's really coming into his own and pulling off more and more of the like high-level Sakamoto-style stunts. Not exactly the same genre of stunts Sakamoto does, but the same like rising to the occasion, really over-the-top stunts that I'm really enjoying. So yeah, good stuff. I just kind of wish this battle was more personally significant to Shin. I wish they'd come up with some reason for him to be getting some sort of catharsis out of fighting this guy in particular. That isn't just like, oh, well, he's one of the enemies, so I'm gonna have to take him out. They're doing a good job kind of showing how this is like a major step forward for Shin in terms of like how he sees his own power, how he believes in himself, and comparing himself to others, how strong he feels he is. But Guitar Man could be just anybody, right? Like, there's no reason in particular that he seeks revenge or has some vendetta against him or whatever. But what I think at the end of these big shonen series, you can try to kind of load up all that sort of significance, and sometimes it can feel very forced, convenient, or tedious when all of the heroes just so happen to have a litany of grudges against all of the villains. I think I would prefer this kind of like underbaked but quick moving, impactful style rather than one where we have a whole bunch of like belabored flashbacks and coincidences and stuff. But there is a sweet spot that's like somewhere in the middle of those two things, and I think for Shin, who's like kind of the second biggest protagonist behind Sakamoto, they really ought to have come up with I don't know, something a little more significant for what I assume is his final battle. Maybe not, but the bad guys are kind of like running out of people, you know? There's not too many left to fight. So yeah, good stuff. Lots of great stats, lots of gritty action. I will give it an A+ for the month. Just love all the fight scenes in this series, and we are getting a smorgasbord of fight scenes. Alright, next let's talk about Kinato's Magic. It's a series that has been kind of not my favorite, a little hit and miss for me. Some of the impulses around characterization I found a little unpleasant, certainly uninteresting. Some of the impulses around fan service I think are also a bit misguided. And just the world building, really not that interesting. And none of that has like changed in particular, but they're managing to kind of fill it out in a way that feels a little more interesting, a little more exciting, a little more like curiosity evoking, that they're showing you places that you want to see more of, other cultures that you're curious about. Here they travel to this Majo village, a reclusive society of monk-like warriors. They're all women. They have like a deep fundamental control over their own mana that the guild leader thinks would be very beneficial for Kinato. So he takes Kinato there. Turns out he is considered a wanted criminal in that area. They're immediately captured. It's unclear why he like misunderstood the situation so badly, or if this was all schemed or whatever. Just kind of like a silly development. But of course, they reluctantly accept the idea of training Kinato. They have some sort of arrangement where if he doesn't get any results, then he just has to stay there and use support magic on them. He'll just be like a town healer, masseuse, whatever. And then they just go into training, buffeted only by this very uninteresting, very kind of cliche and annoying plot line, where the chieftain of the village has never interacted with a man before, and of course instantly falls head over heels in love with Kinato, but doesn't even recognize that that's what it is, and she is shocked and confused by her symptoms of lovesickness. There's also kind of a plot line of some of the village people disagreeing with this decision to take them in, wanting to, you know, revolt against the chieftain's wishes, using this as an excuse to kick her out of the chieftain's seat, staging a small coup or whatever. I assume that's what's gonna build up to the actual, like, climax of the arc. But again, like, not really that interesting and very kind of, like, myopic in scope. Like, I think it would be more interesting if there's just at least one other factor at play here. Some sort of external threat that the village is preparing itself to deal with, or some sort of ritual or festival that the timing of Kinato arriving is bad and they need to sort something out, or the chieftain, even if they just enhanced this stupid lovesickness plotline with, like, the chieftain has to undertake some rite of adulthood in order to bear a new successor, and then the older women of the village realize, like, oh boy, you know, maybe we found a father right here. I don't know, just something more substantial, because right now it's just, like, very in, like, flimsy little character moments that really offer, like, nothing new or nothing surprising. And they've just been doing this for, like, 3 chapters now. More than 3. Like, 3.5 chapters have basically just been training, interspersed with, like, little bits of, like, fan service. Like, they all go take a bath. Although I do like that the really burly girls get a little fan service, too. That's cool. But still, training. And I'm like, man, you should be looking at the graveyard of your peers right now. There is a lot of series in Jump that are getting axed 20 chapters in, 25 chapters in, 16 chapters in, and you're gonna spend, like, 4+ chapters, a half volume or more, on a training arc after your character's been in, like, one battle? I don't know, man. I don't know. We saw this before with a little series called Otter of the Flame, and that managed to run for, like, what, 30, 40 chapters or something? Not bad, but could have been better. Probably could have been better if you didn't spend all this time dicking around on training arcs. I gotta say, I'm just not a fan of the training arc in general. It just feels like slamming the brakes on anything interesting happening. But whatever, I don't know. It certainly has been worse in the past, this series. We'll give it a B- for now. It's alright. Okay, now we're gonna talk about Witch Watch, but I think I actually have to move my laundry. I'm waiting for the, like... You'll hear it to tell me that the washer is done. Or not? Okay, whatever. Let's just talk about Witch Watch, I guess. Really good stuff this month. The arc of trying to get all of the bone pieces and prevent the resurrection, the battle on the cruise ship, continues, reaching a whole lot of climaxes. Probably the major significant final character moment of Keigo, where his wolf persona sacrifices himself, then sort of... Oh, there it is. Okay, 1 second. Hee. Okay, so... What was I saying? Wolf sacrifices himself and kind of, like, merges with Keigo, who is then filled with a renewed determination and vigor. He sort of has the power of both now. He reminisces on their strange relationship. You know, we're at the point of the series where you can put together some very quick but very evocative montages of just significant scenes and panels and stuff. Something that can, you know, sum up a whole lot of emotional development within just one page. We get a whole bunch of that, and then he, of course, finishes off the bad guy with some awesome choreographed attacks. Then, right when it seems like everything is kind of wrapping up, like they've run out of bad guys to fight, the good guys have kind of had all of their victories. Some characters that we already counted out are back, which I already quite love. And in a pretty crazy way, too, where one warlock has the power of dueling, summoning this impartial spirit of a game master. locking them into this duel where their lives are on the line. It's a total genre shift, something that I think in a lot of cases I would probably find like a little frustrating, honestly, to expect us to kind of get invested in and care about a game that is like totally arbitrary and disconnected from the events of the series. You know, when Hunter x Hunter returns, I'm probably going to have some complaints along these lines because they are also in the middle of playing a very convoluted card game in the middle of another gigantic sprawling arc. And it's like, whoa, why are we doing this? But here, the game is simple enough and the pacing is fast enough, and it's a good blend of comedy with, like, Ban, the dragon, being horrible at it and immediately making very, very questionable decisions, kind of inviting the reader to puzzle out how they could possibly win. But there's also some good intrigue as well. I really like that the villain teams, even though there is a rule against communicating, burn one of their lives in order to communicate once and impart some sort of simple strategy that is so far winning. My guess is that it's just play the card that is 2x the current round number until you are, you know, beyond cards you can play, and then play, I don't know. I started talking about it and I was like, yeah, maybe it doesn't make sense. But I like that sort of intrigue, trying to figure out what was communicated that has then led to this strategy, and then what can I communicate to counteract that strategy, knowing that communication is so limited. There's a bit of a Kaiji-esque feel here as well. Reminds me a lot of One Poker. Just it being a game where you have a very, very limited pool of resources, and you're trying to spend your worst cards losing to their strongest cards, and your strongest cards to beat their mid-tier cards, etc. It also reminds me a lot of an arc really, really early on in Sketdance, where the Sketdan challenges the student council in a series of games, and Boss-san and the president square off. It's their first showdown, or first real introduction to the student council president. And just kind of the psychoanalysis they go through, and the mind games, and the amount of depth they get out of a relatively simple card game, I really, really enjoy. I don't know. I have a note for myself here. Don't spend too long trying to figure it out. I think it has to be some sort of stratagem where you're always playing a card somehow determined by what round number it is. Because it has to be something like that to explain why they've always been able to play the same card, the villains. Which, of course, is, like, the beneficial strategy. At the same time, it could be something, like, weirder than that. I don't know. Like, I feel like, basically, Shinohara-sensei charges up little tricks and puzzles like this across all sorts of potential games or game theory type situations. With Sketdance, we saw it a lot as well, with like the quizzes and riddles and stuff. That basically he's just got like a backlog of these ones that he thinks would be clever, and is just always waiting for a chance to deploy them in his manga. I finished reading Astra Lost in Space just recently, which I really, really enjoyed. Another fantastic work from somebody who's becoming one of my favorite mangaka very quickly. And that, while it didn't have, like, your conventional games and puzzles, still had a lot of, like, twists that are just barely anticipatable, you know, kind of mind games and intricate situations where you can kind of work out and discern what must be happening a little bit in advance. Also some just, like, crazy curveballs, too. So it's an interesting kind of element of his manga in general, is just this feeling of mystery and intrigue and duplicity. At any rate, all this is to say, great month of chapters, two very, very different modes. Some of the most pure battling we've seen in this series, but also this mind game, card game type thing. We will give it an S. Alright, next let's talk about Someone Hertz, which just got the cover page. This series is doing really, really well, it seems. Of all the series that came out in the last year or so, I never would have guessed that this would become one of the more successful ones. It did kind of feel doomed. It did feel like not a great fit for this magazine. But I think they've really woven a nice balance between the kind of cute 1v1 rom-com and something that still has a bit of that like shonen element of competition and power scaling and world building, rivals and improvement and teamwork. All that good stuff. All of this well on display within the 4 chapters this month. They go to a live recording of the radio show that they listen to all the time. Some good funnies there. A nice sense of world building, as I mentioned before, as they just introduce more rival characters and their motivations and a sense of their power relative to our MCs. Then we get a more traditional chapter where they're just trying to come up with fodder for their prompts. So they go to a ranch, have some nice slice of life shenanigans. The structure I like to call an activity buffet, where you just get like 4 panels per gag. It almost moves into like a 4-coma mode, with just little punchlines and setups about all sorts of different activities there. Some nice moments of closeness as well, and a generally nice message of like shedding embarrassment, which is then followed up in the next chapter where the rival character appears. He also hangs out with a girl, and they listen to the radio show together and stuff. But he kind of like disdains the radio show and is like, I'm just doing it because she likes it. And he's like, oh, what does that mean? Like, why are you doing it just because she likes it? And he's just straight up like, oh, because I have a crush on her. And this brings me closer to her. I want to date her eventually, so I want to have, this rapport with her and this closeness with her. And he's like, isn't it the same with you? Don't you have a crush on that girl too? And of course he's all flustered and stuff, but I really, really like that. His very stark honesty, his totally unashamed honesty about his love. Fun stuff, little adventures, silly, and then we get into what seems like it'll be a more substantial arc, which is the amateur round tournament. For those that don't typically get read on air, they have a particular competition. I wonder, is it really this, like, competitive? Like, I know these radio call-in shows are real. I know, these prompting corners and one-liners and stuff, that's real. I know that's real because I've seen it enough times in different anime and manga. I know they do, like, on-air battles, usually at, like, a studio where people are writing their one-liners on, like, whiteboards and holding them up one at a time and people are judging. But do they really have stuff like amateur tournaments and, like, point tallying across radio seasons and listener equation? Or is that an invention of this manga? I don't know. But at any rate, to kind of kickstart this arc and to give it some significance, we learn about the origin of his fascination with the radio show, how it was a comfort to him in a time when he was really, really stressed. He felt pressured to apply to this really elite high school that they just call Elite High. Good joke. And that he found this show when he was up all night cramming. Nice. It does really call attention to the fact that they're all, like, school kids listening to this radio show that starts at midnight and goes until 3 a.m. and then they go to school. It's a little baffling, but whatever. And he just kind of, like, reflects on the broad strokes of his life and everything that led him here. And frames it as, like, we all just kind of make choices. We can come up with all sorts of post-hoc rationalizations, but at the end of the day, we just end up choosing things, and we're never ever going to be able to know if we made the right choice or not. The only thing we can do is try our best to prove to ourselves that the path you took was surely the right one, because it is full of such wonderful things. And I thought that was a really, really great attitude. I don't know, I found that quite moving. Because at the end of the day, I do believe that there are some choices so huge and so complex with so many pros and cons on each side that you really cannot ever come to any sort of definitive, rational conclusion as to which decision is better. These broad movements in our life, I think ultimately you just kind of do what you do. And the last thing you need is to constantly be beating yourself up and going, oh man, I wish I'd gone to the other school. I wish I had done this. I wish I had dated this person and not that person. I wish I had moved or not moved or whatever. Because you got to recognize that had you done all of the opposites, you could still be beating yourself up. You could still be going, I wish I had done all those other things too. All you got to do is your best. All you got to do is try to make the most of what you've chosen and really feel confident that this must have been the right choice. Yeah, this is great stuff. It's great stuff. I think that was maybe their best chapter yet. I gave it the highest grade of any chapter I've assigned yet. We will give it an A for the month. Very, very good. I am really quite enjoying this series. I don't always give it the highest grades because it's not like mind-blowingly good. And I think I'm kind of like comparing it to like other 1v1 rom-coms and stuff where I'm like, oh, this is good, but it's not the best. Whereas, you know, like some of the battle shonen in here, I'm like, yeah, that's one of the best. Akane-banashi, in terms of like artistic competition manga, it's one of the best. But I do enjoy this, and I do think this is a very, very strong month for the series. All right, next, I'm going to talk about me and Roboco. Great cover here, parodying Dragon Quest, Dai, The Journey of Dai, or whatever. I got to read that at some point. Another super, super long-running Jump series that I think I would really enjoy getting to. I love the world of Dragon Quest. We had 4, episodic chapters, no real arc here or whatever. The first one was going inside Roboco to try to cure some sort of sickness with all of the Roboco juniors, trying to help them out. There's like a whole society of Roboco juniors within Roboco. I like how quickly they were able to establish this like sense of community, a society even that they all maintain within her that's like very wacky and strange and pointless. But I like shtick like that. Very good. One where she instantly gets warped over to the Showa era gag comedy timeline. Really, really enjoyed this one. I always enjoy when she goes to the parallel universes with the other Robocos. Here there was a lot of great jokes about the Bondo of that timeline making all sorts of like really misogynistic and violent jokes, and Roboco's just like, oh, that wouldn't cut it in Reiwa. we're a Reiwa era manga. You can't be saying that stuff. I like that. Pretty good shtick there. But I wish it got like crazier. Like it didn't seem to go full send in parodying the overall structure of those manga. Ultimately, it was more like the Reiwa manga style of gag comedy writing. I wish it had a bit more of like non sequitur, a bit more disjoint stuff. Then one where Roboco does a variety of odd jobs because she has too much debt from spending frivolously on things she doesn't need. Which I can relate to. Thank God I'm not in debt, but I sure do blow a lot of money. I like the joke that she's trying to juggle all of these jobs and then she just starts mixing them up frantically. There's a lot of Yu Yu Hakusho jokes in this one, which I thought was pretty cool, but again, I'm always wondering, isn't Roboco like being read mostly by like 12-year-olds? I guess they're asking their moms and dads, what is this parodying? And they go, oh, that takes me back. And then the final chapter of the month I really, really enjoyed. It's a Roboco fashion show. They completely eschew the normal format of the manga. Instead, it's just as if you're reading a fashion magazine where she's doing a different outfit for each day of the week, showing off its highlights and then showing like little scenarios with it. Of course, it goes through a series of crazier and crazier escalations before becoming just totally deranged manga parody. Really, really good stuff, and I just love how much they played with the typical manga formatting for this one. We will give it an A+ this month, as pretty much always. I love Roboco. It makes me laugh. It makes me feel like a dumbass, but hey, it's a great time. Okay, then our final series, I believe, is Kagurabachi. With the arc, the flashback saga, I guess, and the arc of the talks with this new island nation wraps up here. Everyone is freaking annihilated. They kind of got their shit rocked. Only Shiba is kept alive as he is a good messenger. There's some good kind of like formal elements to these chapters as they shift gears and talk about, you know, grand strategy of how they were going to try to deal with this situation. Do they give in to their demands? Do they have weapons available to them? There's some nice kind of like interwoven world building and lore that we find out a little bit about how like certain things like the flame bone of the starving, which is of course the weapon that real giddy freakazoid uses. We kind of see how that's perceived before it is manifest again into the world as another potential option to try to deal with this threat. I kind of wish there was like even more of that. It's such a good opportunity to just be like, what if we contact the whatever tribe? No, they would never ever have dealings with us again. And it's like, yeah, you know, you could have them come back then in a later arc and it would be hype. Or you can just leave it as like, yeah, they said they would never have dealings with us again, and they never did. But just as something else that's out there, just something to kind of populate the world. I really like when series kind of take an opportunity to do that. But yeah, it's nice. And I think the weird structuring here has sort of a strength where when they're talking about the enchanted blades and how feasible or unfeasible and stuff they are, and how Chihiro's dad is just this like weird dude who's a total amateur, and why does he have such confidence he can do this, and blah 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 blah. I think that's all like something that plays nicely with the fact that we all already know what's gonna happen. We all have seen, you know, the entire point of the series is that yes, the enchanted blades were made and that they were capable of much destruction and harm and the malediction and stuff. So it's like there's this kind of dreadful certainty knowing how these things are ultimately going to resolve. Then there's a whole bunch of stuff about like the Soga clan and the gift of prophecy and whether it propagates through the main branch or the branch, or when should we expect it to reappear, and if she is forced to bear the child of the enemy ruler, will they have the gift of prophecy, blah 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 blah. That got a little bit too much in the weeds to me, and the fact that they were trying to kind of like have this sort of thing as one side of her characterization while also exploring her blooming love for Chihiro's dad on the other side of her characterization, and sort of blending these together to kind of tell some story of her ultimate sacrifice and her lost love that we know eventually is regained, but blah 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 blah. It all just feels a little overwrought to me. It just feels a little unnecessary maybe, because again, we know where this is all going more or less. So I don't know. I think this flashback arc, it's impressed me a lot in that they've taken good opportunity to delve into a little bit more world building, delve into a little bit more characterization, and then also just to enjoy some really like insanely high power fights that are sort of consequence free, because, you know, it's not like they have to power scale around those characters in the present day anymore. At the same time, though, it does feel still a little pointless. Like, there is no kind of looming mystery that we're still trying to connect the threads to puzzle out how do we get from A to B. we already kind of know. I think the biggest kind of unknowns are like how does Chiro come to be and what happens with his mom. But even then, like, she's not around. We know that much. So it's not going to be any huge surprise when she dies or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. It's good stuff. It's impressed me at the start. I was just like, I don't really understand why we're doing this at all. But they're getting a lot of mileage out of it. We will give it an A+ for the month. And that is it, I believe. Yes, indeedy. This was last tier's list. One Piece, the new high watermark. P grade for peak, let's say. Some very, very high placements here. This is a bit of a reshuffling. We've had a few things move down into the lower ranks of A, but still a solid force in the S tiers, being joined by Ruri Dragon. And nothing below a B-. That's what we like to see. That's what makes reading the magazine so fun. I will see you at the end of June, which I'm sure will be here after I blink my eyes 3 more times. Holy crap. Life goes fast when you're having a good time. Alright, see ya.